Good afternoon. My name is J.Speedy, and this is my subcommittee presentation. Today I'm going to be going over my proposed policy, problem statement, evidence, alternate policies, projected outcomes, and conclusion. First, as a reminder, the policy that I am proposing is mandatory threat assessment teams and training for each school district in every state. Mass school shootings wreak unprecedented havoc in our communities, disrupting our culture and creating an environment of fear. Despite being considered low-frequency events, they are increasing in frequency and lethality. 7 of the 10 deadliest mass school shootings in the United States have occurred in the last 15 years, totaling over 100 deaths. If we cannot create measures to stop this trajectory, mass school shootings may well become more frequent and deadlier, disrupting our communities and inhibiting our children's access to education. This chart demonstrates the increasing frequency of mass shooter incidents in all venues, not just school shootings, within the United States, starting in 1966 with Charles Whitman's attack on the University of Texas. As you can see from the line of trajectory, these events are increasing at a substantial rate. This next chart is the same data, but only in school settings. K through 12 schools are highlighted in blue, while universities are in orange. The gray bar represents overall incidence, and the trend line as well as for overall incidence. As you can see, it is less steep than the overall mass shooting trend line in the previous slide, but it is still clearly increasing. The final chart demonstrates the injuries and fatalities from mass school shootings. The trend line is for fatalities only, which as you can see has increased rapidly over the decades. Fatalities have more than doubled in some years compared to Charles Whitman's attack in the University of Texas in 1966, such as the Virginia Tech massacre in 2007 and the Sandy Hook Elementary and Dewey Coast University shootings in 2012.
I'm here at the scene of tomorrow's shooting, where a 15-year-old will kill 4 children, 2 adults, and then turn the gun on himself.
When the shooting starts happening tomorrow, first I'll probably just think it's firecrackers or a car backfiring or something. He told some of us that his dad kept the gun in his closet, and he always talked about using it on, the people that bullied him. Tomorrow I'll probably say that I wish I told someone.
After the shooting, we're going to feel pretty bad about picking on him, but until then, we'll probably just keep doing it because he's pretty weird.
Tomorrow I'll probably point out that something has seemed off with him since the beginning of the school year.
And I'm now joined by the officers who will be the first responders tomorrow. What additional details can you share with us?
Well, someone is expected to tell us after the shooting that the shooter has been posting on social media about doing this for weeks.
So how will you explain the shooting to your daughter?
Actually, I won't get to explain it to her because she won't make it.
This is Christine Lynn, reporting from the scene of another shooting we'll say we never saw coming.
This video by Sandy Hook as part of Sandy Hook Promise as part of their campaign of See Something, Say Something, which is all about capitalizing on warning signs and encouraging people who notice warning signs to report them to someone. And this feeds directly into threat assessment principles and policies, is having kids or students or parents, any sort of bystander reporting these warning signs to a threat assessment team, then has a threat assessment team gives them access to analyze whether these are viable threats or not. In the U.S. Secret Study of Thwarted Targeted Violence from 2021, every single case was averted by community members who came forward after observing warning signs. Threat assessment is a proactive approach designed to meet the challenge of prevention by handling those warning signs that are reported and assessing them for validity. The National Institute of Justice funded a study at the University of Virginia, and it examined whether threat assessment could effectively prevent school violence and found that school threat assessment teams were able to resolve threats by referrals to mental health services and had very few suspensions and/or expulsions. Additionally, the outcomes did not vary for students by race. Another study on threat assessment teams in Nevada demonstrated an improvement in school climate and addressing problem behaviors in students. Another review of 67 thwarted plots, targeted violence plots by the U.S. Secret Service determined that in nearly all cases, those plotters had communicated their intent to someone else, had experienced stressors and grievances within the past 5 years, and were interested in violent themes as well as displayed concerning behaviors. Similarly, in researching 134 mass school shootings or attempted mass school shootings, the Violence Project found that 78% of attackers leaked their plans ahead of time, and 87% of attackers were in visible crisis prior to the shootings. Additionally, in his 2014 study, Madfist interviewed people who had been directly involved in preventing targeted mass attacks and determined that leakage was the main precursor for prevention. The studies and statistics illustrate the fact that targeted violence is preventable. If we can train members of the education community in observing and identifying concerning behaviors, as well as assessing behaviors that are brought to their attention through anonymous reporting, anonymous tip lines, or even concerned students, we stand a chance to capitalize on pre-attack behaviors. Alternate policies to threat assessment include zero tolerance policies, which are based on deterrence theories and designed to be swift, harsh disciplinary measures for students who violated school safety rules. The idea was to mitigate school attacks by acting as a deterrence and provided a logistical benefit of taking the burden of investigative hours away from educators who previously had to vet each uttered threat for authenticity. However, this broad application of the policy to any offense has doubled suspension rates for students. This interruption in a student's education is sometimes permanent and can set students up for a future of crime. Further studies have concluded that minorities and students with disabilities have been negatively and disproportionately affected by these policies. Researchers have estimated that despite 75% of schools employing these punitive measures, there has been limited evidence of violence reduction. Target hardening, a term used by FBI and U.S. Homeland Security, means making public places such as school buildings less attractive and difficult to violently target. This can range from simple addition of security cameras or locks all the way to adding more security guards and even arming teachers. There are mixed reviews regarding the effectiveness of target hardening. Some researchers found that added security measures increase student anxiety and disrupt the learning environment. There is no research that supports arming teachers as an adequate improvement for safety. And there is research concluding the presence of security guards did increase perceptions of safety in the school, as well as research declaring the presence of security guards was not effective in reducing violence. These added security measures have been demonstrated to fail in previous mass school shootings. Most notably, the Red Lake High School shooting in 2005 involved a 16-year-old student who killed his police officer grandfather, stole the duty weapon, then traveled to his high school where he killed the unarmed security guard, walked through the metal detector before killing 6 more people. This individual, who was intent on his violence, was not deterred by the multiple security measures in place. Control legislation actually consists of many policies under the same heading. For the sake of time, I'm choosing to focus on 2 of the most salient policy proposals, such as red flag laws, which allow people to petition the courts to remove firearms from the home of a person they believe to be a danger. States like California and Florida have created their red flag laws in response to school shootings. Unfortunately, these red flag policies depend on other people going through the process of reporting someone as a danger to the court system. This has failed us multiple times, such as the Highland Park's 4th of July shooter earlier this year, who was able to legally obtain firearms he used in his attack, despite prior threats against his family members, who did not want to move forward with petitioning the courts, and even signed off on him obtaining firearms. Also, the court process and legal thresholds may not result in removing firearms from people who have been petitioned as a danger, as demonstrated in the Buffalo, New York grocery store mass shooting earlier this year. While these policies have potential to prevent perpetrators from legally accessing weapons, it does not prevent perpetrators from illegally acquiring weapons or acquiring them through different means. For example, the Santa Monica college shooter built his own gun from legally purchasing unregulated gun parts after he was denied a firearms license due to his mental health history. Another policy is tightening the background check process for purchasing firearms. As it currently stands, Firearms purchased through private sales online or at gun shows do not require background checks. So by passing universal background checks for all firearm purchases, it would limit the ability for those who have criminal records from purchasing firearms. This policy has been enacted in states like California and has mixed reviews on its effectiveness in curbing gun violence. In regards to addressing the specific problem of mass shooting, case history alone demonstrates the futility of this policy. For example, the Uvalde Robb Elementary School shooter had no criminal history, nor did he fall into any of the other prohibited categories for gun ownership. And the same can be said for the Tops Friendly Market shooter, the El Paso Walmart shooter, the Isla Vista shooter, the Umpqua Community College shooter, the Owikos College shooter, and the Parkland shooter, to name an exhaustive but still relatively few amount of shooters, mass shooters, who all legally purchased their firearms and had no criminal records. Research has concluded that perpetrators intent on harming others will find a way to do so regardless of gun laws. As it still stands, the deadliest mass school attack in U.S. history is the Bath Consolidated School explosion in 1927 that killed 45 people after the perpetrator was angry with his estranged wife. Even the Columbine killers intended to murder most of their schoolmates with explosives in the cafeteria, though it is worth mentioning these explosives failed to detonate. Other nations with strict gun control laws also experienced mass murder, as exhibited by Anders Breivik in Norway, who plotted his attack over a year, which was the required length necessary to receive his weapon. He used both explosives and guns in his very lethal attack. More examples include the Kazan school shooting in Russia and the 2015 Paris attacks. In other words, perpetrators who experience a grievance and feel that violence is the only method to solve their problem often acquire their weapons near the end of their pathway to violence, not before. Another policy is concerning mental health. There's been a push for more policies concerning mental health funding and expanding current mental health access in our school system. A report by the Federal School Safety Commission highlighted a need to incorporate comprehensive mental health services in school to increase protective factors and reduce risk factors contributing to the violence. Unfortunately, as of 2017, wide disparities in school counselor to student ratio demonstrate rates as high as one counselor to 924 students and as low as one counselor to 202 students. To answer these issues, policymakers have looked into state legislation for reform. But unfortunately, since most mass shooters are not seriously mentally ill, increasing mental health service prevents limited utility in preventing acts of targeted violence. This is exhibited by the many mass shooters who saw counselors or underwent psychiatric therapy prior to their attacks. For example, the Santa Monica college shooter was in a psychiatric hospital for a year after making threats to his school. He was released after he was deemed no longer dangerous, and a brief time later he proceeded with his plans anyway. The Thurston High School shooter also saw therapists for depression, with regular visits over the course of the school year before his attack. The Sandy Hook shooter, the Tops Market shooter, the Thousand Oaks Bar and Grill shooter, the Parkland shooter, the Washington Navy Yard shooter, and the Aurora movie theater shooter all are harrowing examples of attackers who underwent regular counseling sessions but still carried out deadly attacks. Multiple projected outcomes for implementing the policy of mandating threat assessment in each school district. Negative or unintended consequences that could occur as a result include certain demographics being unfairly targeted, a division of distrust among the student body and staff members in the school taking on a heavier workload for training and assessment, increased taxes or district programs experiencing reallocation of funds to pay for the implementation, and further unintended consequences may be the uneven implementation across schools, such as one school not holding regular training versus another school attending regular training. Positive implications, on the other hand, also may arise. This includes lower rates of bullying, fewer long-term suspensions, a more positive perception of school climate, less aggressive behavior, and higher perception of safety in the school body. Ultimately, though, the most positive impact of implementing threat assessment policies is preventing impending mass school shootings. Threat assessment teams have empirical research backing their efficacy. Case studies of past perpetrators have consistently demonstrated perpetrators exhibiting observable warning signs prior to their attack. the U.S. Secret Service, the FBI, the U.S. Department of Education, they've all repeatedly insisted that threat assessment policies are the best chance to prevent targeted violence. Threat assessment takes the important aspects of all other policies and puts them together in a multidisciplinary and comprehensive work. For example, it takes the tenets of zero tolerance policies, which look at treating each threat as viable, but instead of disciplining students, it critically assesses whether the threat has any merit and what productive outcomes can be accomplished. Threat assessments also involve looking at a student's access to firearms and working with parents as well as law enforcement in either removing the guns from the house or removing access to those guns. It also involves mental health counselors and referrals. And it can be used in conjunction with target hardening methods to ensure improved success and effectiveness. By implementing policies that mandate teams for each school district in each state, we can start building the infrastructure of prevention and safety based on past case studies and research. We must protect children who have inalienable rights and should be loved, should be taken care of physically and mentally, and should not be brought into the world only to suffer. Indira Gandhi. Thank you, and as always, if you are interested in the references that I use, please review our module where I've linked this video.